King Eorl ruled the newly established kingdom of Rohan for 35 years, until meeting his end in battle, once again defending these lands against the Easterlings. The throne then passed down to Eorl's son, Brego, best known for making Edoras their capital, with the Golden Hall Meduseld built as the home and royal hall of the king. Brego was succeeded by his son, Aldor, after his eldest son, Baldur, was lost traveling through the paths of the dead. Aldor lived a long life and ruled for many years, with his reign considered by many a golden age, during which they expanded their lands and established Dunharrow as a refuge for their people. His reign is also known for having dealt a crippling blow to the wild men of Dunland, who once lived in the hills and valleys of these lands, but were driven off over many years as the Rohirrim migrated into the territory. During the time of King Aldor, this campaign took a great step forward as the Dunlandings were chased across the gap of Rohan. And while this allowed for the Rohirrim to expand and prosper, the Wildmen would never forget the theft of their lands, becoming their bitterest of enemies, and taking every opportunity to conduct raids against them. Aldor was then succeeded by his son Freya, followed by Freywine and Goldwine. Rule then fell to Deor, 7th king of Rohan. During his reign, the Dunlandings, who had been subdued for a time, once again proved a threat, invading their northern lands. And while King Deor led an army to drive back their enemy, they learned that the Wildmen had taken Isengard, an impenetrable fortress which the Rohirrim could not defeat. And so Rohan was forced to live with this Dunlanding threat, defending against raids and attacks across their lands. As a result, Deor's son and heir, Gram, would spend all 23 years of his reign at war with the Wildmen, until succeeded by his own son, known to history as Helm Hammerhand, 9th king of Rohan. Helm would also spend the entirety of his reign at war, as the Dunlanding threat continued to grow. One of the enemy leaders was now a man named Freka, who claimed to be a descendant of King Freywine, and therefore was of both Dunlanding and Rohirrim blood. Freka believed that he could use his powerful position to intimidate King Helm, and so led a large army to Edoras, where he attempted to negotiate a marriage alliance, in which Helm's daughter would marry Freka's son, Wolf. However, the king of Rohan recognized this as an attempt by the Dunlandings to get closer to the throne, and so refused the offer, leading to an exchange of harsh words, ending in Helm striking and killing Freka with a single powerful blow. He then declared Freka's son, Wolf, and his people enemies of Rohan. 4 years later, the king led an army to confront them in the north. However, Wolf was ready for the attack, marching his forces out of Isengard and defeating King Helm in battle. The Wildmen then invaded Rohan in full force, even killing Helm's son, Haleth, as he defended the capital of Edoras, while the rest of the Rohirrim fled west to the Hornburg. Unfortunately for King Helm and his people, their allies in Gondor were unable to help, as they were busy fighting a war of their own against the Corsairs of Umbar, and so the Dunlandings overran their territory, besieging the Hornburg to starve out their enemies. Wolf then took the throne of Rohan, ruling for a time that came to be known as the Long Winter. Meanwhile, Helm Hammerhand grew gaunt and grim as his people suffered during the siege. Watching his enemies from the fortress that would later be named Helm's Deep in his honor, King Helm could no longer stand by while his people were slowly exterminated, and so he began a one-man stealth campaign, leaving the fortress in the dead of night to kill Dunlanding warriors with his bare hands. Adding to the terror he created, Helm would also sound a deep and ominous horn from inside the fortress before leaving for his nightly killings, warning his enemies that death was coming. However, Helm could not keep up his work forever, and one night froze to death outside the fortress. Once winter passed and spring returned, Helm's nephew led a small army from the refuge of Dunharrow and took back the capital of Edoras, killing Wolf to become the 10th king of Rohan. With Gondor having defeated the Corsair threat, they were now able to aid the Rohirrim in driving back the Dunlandings and retaking Isengard, which would be granted to Saruman the White, a powerful wizard who was considered a great ally of the kingdoms of men. Freyalaf would then be succeeded by his son, Britta, who made Rohan a prosperous land once more. Yet it would be during his reign that the orc migration from the Misty Mountains escalated drastically, after suffering devastating losses in the War of the Dwarves and Orcs. The Rohirrim would then begin a campaign to drive these creatures from their lands, continuing during the reign of Britta's son and heir, Walda, who ruled for 9 years before being killed in an orc attack. His son Folka then took the throne and destroyed every last orc stronghold in Rohan. Folka died during a hunt to kill a great boar of the Firian wood, and was succeeded by his son Folkwine, who ruled for many years, once again engaging the Dunlandings, who were encroaching on their lands, and sending his sons Folkred and Fastred to lead a Rohirrim army to help defend southern Gondor against the Haradrim. Both men were killed in the fighting, and so the steward of Gondor, Turin II, paid a rich wergild to the king of Rohan in honor of their sacrifice. Folkwine's third son, Thengel, then inherited the throne, followed by his own son, Thengel. Under the rule of King Thengel, Captain Thorongil, later revealed to be Aragorn, son of Arathorn, came into the service of Rohan and Gondor, earning a great reputation as he fought for the defense of both realms. After Thengel's death, his son Theoden became king, and proved wise, kind-hearted, and valiant in battle. However, by 3014, the royal court had been infiltrated by Grima Wormtongue, a servant of Saruman who used spells and witchcraft to manipulate the king to issue orders that benefited the White Wizard's greater plans, as he attempted to temporarily ally with the Dark Lord Sauron against the free peoples of Middle-earth in the hopes of capturing the One Ring of Power for himself. Saruman then began sending his Orc and Uruk-hai armies to invade Rohan, as well as allying with the Dunlendings, granting them the opportunity to take revenge against their hated enemies. Although Theoden's son, Theodred, and nephew, Eomer, attempted to defend the realm as the War of the Ring intensified, Grima's manipulation of the king worked against them, and after Theodred's death in the First Battle of the Fords of Isen, the realm fell further into disrepair, made worse when Grima arranged for Eomer to be arrested. However, as the wizard Gandalf worked to organize and prepare the free peoples for the war against Sauron, he ventured to Edoras to consult with the king, but instead discovered Theoden's peril, and so he broke the spell which haunted him, allowing for Eomer to be released and Grima banished from the realm. Unfortunately, with so much of Rohan already lost, Theoden chose to march to the refuge of Helm's Deep, where they would make their last stand. The Rohirrim fought valiantly in the Battle of the Hornburg, but could not overcome the forces of Isengard, and so the king led a final charge against them, only to discover that the forest race of Huorns had come to their aid, cutting off the enemy's retreat, while the wizard Gandalf joined them with an army of fresh Rohirrim warriors as reinforcements. With all three armies pressing the attack, the enemy forces were destroyed, and thanks to the Huorns and Ents, who had also attacked and captured Isengard, the Orcs and Uruk-hai that survived had nowhere to retreat. King Theoden then received a messenger from Gondor bearing the red arrow and asking for Rohan's aid in the coming fight against the armies of Sauron. And so the king gathered his men and rode to their defense at the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, where Theoden killed a chieftain of the Haradrim. However, Theoden was mortally wounded by the Lord of the Nazgul, also known as the Witch King of Angmar, who sought to kill the ruler of Rohan. Yet Eowyn, Theoden's niece, and a small hobbit named Merry stood in his way, prepared to defend the king with their lives. Although they would normally stand no chance against him, Merry had been gifted a barrow blade by Tom Bombadil, specifically crafted many years earlier to defeat the Witch King. And so when the creature stood ready to kill Eowyn, Merry stabbed him in the back of the knee with the enchanted blade, breaking the spell which protected his body and allowing for Eowyn to drive her sword through his head. And while King Theoden soon died from his wounds, the realms of men proved victorious in the battle. Eomer, who now inherited the rule of Rohan, then led his warriors alongside the forces of Gondor to confront Sauron at the Black Gate, in order to distract his armies, thereby giving time for Frodo Baggins to reach Mount Doom and destroy the One Ring of Power. And so it was that after the defeat of Sauron and destruction of the One Ring, Eomer made Rohan a prosperous kingdom once more, with his sister Eowyn marrying Faramir, son of the last steward of Gondor, thereby strengthening the ties to their longtime allies, now under the rule of King Aragorn, heir of Isildur and rightful king of Gondor and Arnor. The friendship and alliance between Aragorn and Eomer would see them continue to draw swords together for years, as Gondor and Rohan eliminated the last remnants of the Dark Lord's armies. A special thanks to all those who contribute to CivilizationEx, like Oren Bao, the Ice Eye, Mevel, Andorra Farsight, and Zack of All Trades Trials of the Snowy Sword Brotherhood. You all make these videos possible, and I am eternally grateful for your support. If you would like to help CivilizationEx and gain early access to videos, access to the Patreon-only series Heroes of Lore and Legend, and vote on future content to be produced, you can click on the Patreon link in the description box below and pledge any amount you'd like on a monthly basis. Or if you'd prefer to make a single donation, you can use the PayPal link also in the description below. And please be sure to like and subscribe and click on the links to see more.